Hey friends, and welcome back to My Creative Space. Today's guest is May Kytonen. She's a visual artist based in Seattle, Washington, creating work sourced from her mixed Taiwanese heritage. After graduating with an interdisciplinary visual arts degree from the University of Washington, May started exploring different types of artworks in fabrics, textures, fibers, collage, and most recently, melted plastics. Her work has been exhibited numerous times throughout the Pacific Northwest, winning several awards and grants throughout the city. And you can find her work in public spaces such as libraries and stations. And just from a personal standpoint, I've worked with May on a few video projects, and she is an amazing friend, super humble and really talented, and she has a lot of wisdom with regards to being an artist in this space. And so, without further ado, May Kytonen. First of all, how does that feel to know that your work is out there being seen by everyone?
It's funny because it simultaneously feels like a lot and so little. Like, I look back and it feels like I've done quite a few things, and at the same time, it also feels like I could always be doing more. If I think too much about people looking at my work, that can be a little stressful, like a little scary. A reason why I don't like openings, but it's like a whole other conversation. I like going to openings. I hate being the artist who is at the opening. Really? But that's, a story for another time.
I hope we get to that story. But, you've definitely evolved as an artist, and one of my goals is to be a better researcher. So I went through every single Instagram photo. I hope that's not weird, but I did notice this evolution of your artwork. Where I guess you could say, began in terms of fabrics and intertwining yarn.
Yes.
String.
Yes.
And then later becoming like collages and
yes.
like fabrics and then dyes, and then the most recent one, which is I think my favorite, is the melted plastic, which you and Daniel have been working on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Partners in life and now our creative endeavors.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I guess like just kind of going back to where it all started, like talk to me about that whole process. Like what is it like to sort of like step into a role of an artist, and what is it like to sort of evolve over time?
Yeah, that's such a good question. When I was studying art in undergrad, I remember having encouragement from professors, and even just them painting a picture of what it looks like to be a practicing artist outside of school. I remember thinking that process seemed really daunting. The first year or two out of school, I didn't make work, let alone show it. And it was kind of in that period of inner and outer darkness that I realized art was really important to me, both for my own healing and I think seeing the importance of the arts in the community at large. And so I took these small kind of steps of bravery at the time for me, one of which was this Instagram community called The Weaving Kind. They were really encouraging. We would have like weekly assignments where we could submit weaving projects, and they would just celebrate the work that you were doing. There was another group called Women in Art and Media in Spokane, Washington, where I lived at the time, and they were so supportive of me as a female artist and gave me lots of opportunity to show work, and that really gave me the confidence to apply more and to be okay with rejection. And every time I applied to something, whether I got accepted or rejected, I just learned a lot in that process. The cool thing, I really like credit to the city of Spokane and the art community there for my, I'm not saying I'm like have arrived as an artist, but any success I've had as an artist, I really like feel deep gratefulness to Spokane, because the art community there is awesome, super grassroots, really communal. Like they just make space for each other, and I was really supported in the last couple of years there. Really found a place to come into my own voice and into my practice. And yeah, it's funny to look back now and think that I used to wrestle with even calling myself an artist, and now it's like, oh, of course I am. Regardless of what I get into, regardless of what I get rejected from or accepted to, like I'm an artist, and that feels really good to say and to be in that place. I'm also not like 22 anymore, so that kind of helps in terms of like, okay, I'm okay with myself now. I'm 30. I think we're figuring some things out. Yeah, but
yeah. You've actually mentioned that to me once before in
really?
our conversation about how it was difficult for you to even consider yourself an artist, even though I believe you were in like the art program at UW at the time, and then like you were making things. You've also told me stories of how like your art just ended up in the trash can because you just like didn't feel creative about it, or like something was
gosh.
Do you mind like exploring some of that with me a little bit?
Wow, I'm glad you remembered me telling you that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of creative people, you maybe wrestle with like an inner critic, which can make your work really good or push you as a person in whatever form creative practice you take, but can also be really detrimental if it's not maybe stewarded in a good way, or if you give it too much place in your life and you don't have spaces or people that are speaking positivity into you too, or your own voice. And I think that's like part of my personality too, is I'm really hard on myself. But yeah, I actually still have this tendency inside of myself, but because I know it, I just move on. So pretty much after I make something, in the process of making something, you kind of get to a point of like, okay, I think this is good. I've reworked it enough that I feel like it's complete. Some pieces never get to a place, but most of the time you kind of get to a landing spot. Sometimes it can be pushed further. I think I'm wrestling with that still. But what happens is that in the probably like the 1 month mark, or maybe a little longer, I start to have more and more hatred for whatever thing that I've created, where I can't look at it. For a long time, I didn't even hang any of my own art in our home, and I had to force myself to, because I just really don't like any work that I make after a certain point. So what I used to do as a student, I would just throw it in the trash can, because I'm like, well, I don't like it. Why not just check it? And my husband Daniel was like, you probably should not do that, because you need to have like a portfolio of like things that you've done. You still can learn from it. And so I don't do that anymore, but I do have to kind of put it away for a time, or maybe forever, because if I keep looking at it, I will just like tear it apart. So I think just knowing that, maybe, I don't know if I'll ever change, but I am happy that I don't just chuck it. So
yeah. I can definitely relate in the sense of editing a video. If it takes too long, I sometimes try to forget. I think my stuff is a little different because it's all digital, and so like it just ends up on a hard drive. I don't actually delete it, but it sort of gets mentally deleted for me in the sense that like it's been so long. For example, I was doing a wedding video that took 3 months, and I was like, I'm gonna get done, and then 1 month passes, I'm like, I'm gonna get done. And so, I think the things that drag on too much for me become things that I start to not hate, but like, what's the word? Despise a little bit. And so that's interesting to hear from another creative that's like a similar feeling.
Yes.
Of sorts. Yeah.
Interesting.
I also sort of struggle with identifying myself as a creative and as an entrepreneur. I think when I first started, like, there's that meme of like, is this creative entrepreneurship? Like, is this an artist? Am I an artist? So I think it's really cool that you've sort of like found that voice of yourself. And you're like, okay, this is like who I am. This is what I do, kind of thing. Did that come? I guess, what was that turning point for you when you were like, oh, like, actually, you know what? I am an artist. And like, I'm okay to say that to people.
I'll have to think about it. Well, so the first time I remember thinking, if I get accepted into this, then I can call myself an artist, was that first show, the Women in Art and Media in Spokane. I remember sending the email, and I remember thinking, if I get accepted into this, then I'll call myself an artist. And I got the email that was like, congrats, and did the show. And after that point, I remember thinking, I still feel like I don't quite count, or I still feel like I got a lot to prove. And then another big moment was I won a grant from Artist Trust in 2017. And I had actually applied the year before and gotten rejected, but then reapplied because they encourage you to. And the community, Artist Trust is amazing. Like, shout out to them. I grew so much because of their programming. They taught me a lot about, they helped me develop professionally as an artist. But all I have to say, reapplied and I got accepted. I remember before I got that acceptance phone call, I remember thinking, if I get this grant from Artist Trust, then I will be an artist. And then I felt good about myself for a week. And then after that, I kind of went back to just normal. And I think it was in all those highs and lows that I realized at some point being an artist has to maybe be an identity that's not about what you, it is about what you do, but maybe not in the success of what you do. I mean, you can look at so many artists in history who weren't successful for a long time, or maybe not even in their lifetime, but we would say that they're artists now. And so, I mean, that's also a whole conversation for another podcast, but what does it mean to be an artist, or what is art? But all I have to say, like, I think maybe at a point the identity as an artist came out of recognizing that I wanted to do art and I wanted to be an artist. So that is what I am.
I think it's very same for like entrepreneurs, because like for that, I think, at least for me, like I associate that with like, oh, how much money can you make, right? So like some entrepreneurs like, well, I made a $10 million business, a $100 million business, like whatever. And like, but I think that's where the sort of like trap comes in, which is like, if I'm defining my worth on that, and then let's say, 1 year my business goes under, then it's like, do I now say that I'm not an entrepreneur? And so what I find amazing about you is that not only are you like super self-aware about like, oh, this is like what I do, but this is what I would do regardless. And then I think about that for myself, and I'm like, would I still do this, even if no one would pay me? And the answer is yes. And I mean, that's especially true when I first got started. Now that it's become my career, I have to like balance those things. And so if you don't mind me transitioning over to something that is not talked a lot about, but do you mind if we talk about money?
Yeah. Oh, I
you don't have to like put out numbers whenever.
I'll put out numbers now.
But so there's a stereotypical like starving artist, like idea, and the image that I usually get is like this angsty teenager who's either a painter or musician, and is like, screw the world, I'm gonna do whatever, Do you think the statement is true that like there's the stereotypical starting artist? If you do, sort of like, what is your thoughts on that? And then if you don't think that that's always true, what do you think are some tools that allow people to become successful?
I think that it isn't always true, but I think I'm still in the midst of navigating what that means, because I also work a 9 to 5. Well, it's, what is it? Full-time 32 hours. So I have time to do my art practice, but I'm also have a fallback and my job is related to the arts, and I love that.
Do you mind if you just tell people what you do? So
I work at Brem Cascadia. It's a art initiative through Fuller Seminary, and they work with artists in the church to kind of build relationships between those communities, and to empower the church to invest in the arts, and to help artists like understand and be more fully connected to the life of the church. So I feel like it's a tremendous gift to do something that is related to art and related to my faith, but and it gives me the financial freedom to be able to do art. I also do make money from art. My husband and I both do, and that has been a gift because we've paid off student loans because of it. And I'm very fortunate in that manner. But I think, I did not know a lot about making money in art, and I'm still learning. And honestly, the first year that we made any significant chunk of money from art, Dan and I were both just kind of shocked. Like, we were shocked and confused.
Yeah.
Like, we did not even try at all. Like, we applied for things and we had people reach out to us, but just felt like a gift. And then, but I guess I would say that we also were open and we were learning a lot. There's a couple of like resources, both online and in print. One is called Getting Your Together as an Artist or something. It's GA. No, you know about it. And it has like a ton of resources on like, what is it, like how do you actually build a career or like be successful as a creative. And there's like another book that I found on sale at a bookstore. It was like in the clearance center, and it was around the same idea of how do you kind of piecemeal, what are like different revenue streams you can bring together as an artist to like make it work financially. I was really curious. The main one I was curious about was grants, because they give you obviously like a bigger chunk of money and often more creative freedom with what you do with that. So the first couple grants that Dan and I won, he won one from the city and I won one from Artist Trust. And the cool thing about grants like those is that you give a proposal, but you kind of get to set the parameters of what you're going to use the money for. And then once they release it to you, it's like you get to decide. So they really honor the artist and the artist's vision in that way. There's obviously other grants that have maybe more parameters for what you do with it.
Can you actually define what a grant is? Or just
sure. Okay, yeah. Okay, my understanding of a grant is that people got buckets of money and they want to give it to you, and it's just like a gifted sum of money, and it's typically towards, like, usually there's kind of a parameter around it, but those parameters can be more or less like loose, or maybe you can have more. So I'll give an example. So like with Artist Trust, they give out $1,500 grants alongside they have fellowships and a bunch of other things. And so you would propose like what you would use the money for. So in the past, people have submitted like, I want to go do this trip to this location where they host workshops, and I will learn how to improve my practice by doing these classes, and this is what the money would go towards. Or I need to buy a table, like actual art things to make my house a better like studio space. Or like I did a community engagement project in Spokane with other Asian American women, and we were telling stories about what it meant to be Asian American in Eastern Washington, and then kind of using that shared kind of sacred space, and then the paper yarn we were making during that, and then I used that and made it into a piece. And then I asked for money so I could pay them some, and then also get paid for the time I was hosting those. So yeah, it's just nice to have a chunk of money where they're like, we believe in your project, go. Maybe much like GoFundMe or something like that. But it's an organization that their whole thing is doing that.
So first of all, I think that what you're doing, and I'm glad that you're one of my guests, because I think what you do is what a lot of people do. It's what I did when I first started. Photography was earning me some money, but it wasn't like my total sum. Yeah. And it wasn't until I got let go that I was like, okay, I gotta make this happen, right? So I think it's really cool to showcase people who are still artistic, are still creative, but they have to still work in another space to kind of like supplement that. And I think that's totally fair and valid. And I think since you're also doing something art related in your actual job or your full job, if you say, I think that's nice to have that balance in some way.
I agree.
But yeah, that's what I wanted to say. But so I guess, so in terms of your actual art though, can you break down sort of like where all these revenue streams are coming from? So like grants obviously is a big one.
Yeah, grants are a huge one. Obviously individual sales. So this is like a whole other conversation too. So whether you're gallery represented, which I've never been gallery represented, but I know artists who are, so they have, typically you are kind of in a contract with, actually I've been in between with a gallery but some you'll have an agreement where, for example, like you have a solo show once or twice a year and you kind of are promising you'll make work for that. And in return, the galleries keep promising the space, and then they're asking that you would give like a cut of whatever sales you make. So typically a gallery, like I've seen as low as 25% commission. I've heard of as high as like 60% commission. Obviously, those are kind of higher end galleries. So that could be a more like stable or steady way to have an income stream if you're like in contract with a gallery and I'm always gonna have a place to show my work, and they have clientele who know me as an artist and will buy my work when it's new. So we knew artists in Spokane who were kind of in that world. I'm not in that place yet. I'm not sure if I even want to, because that comes with its own kind of expectations with working with a gallery. But even for individual shows that I apply to, often that will still give me the opportunity to interface with the community at large, and people get to know my work, and sometimes they like it enough that they want to bring it home. I have a lot of supportive friends in community that also purchase my work. And then the last thing that we have dabbled in is commissions. And I kind of have mixed feelings about commissions now, just because I really like the possibility of working with someone and having a shared vision for a project. But obviously when you share a vision with someone, then you have to kind of navigate expectation and reality, and sometimes their vision doesn't match your vision. And so we've had mixed experiences with that. But
But you've done all.
Yeah, I've done all three of those. Yeah. Oh. And there's probably more ways, but those are the main ways I know of. Yeah.
Okay. It does sound like, and you can comment on this, but it does sound like a lot of this does come down to like networking, relation building, and after kind of like reading your bio and CV and everything, I think there's a testament to like how connected you are with like the community, and like how connected you are with people, and with grants and everything. So I was wondering if you can like just comment on that, about like if that is something that's important, or like.
That was actually one of my worries when we moved across the state. And obviously there's artists who show nationally and internationally, and so I'm not sure what place networking or like knowing people, like how that works. I'm not like big time enough to know about that. But in terms of like a local art community, I felt like Spokane was just totally embraced me as an artist, and I had a lot of really supportive people there. But I was worried when we moved to Seattle, because there are different cities that I wouldn't know people, or they wouldn't trust me or my work. But people have been really generous and gracious, and also very supportive here. So Artist Trust was an organization I learned a lot from. Another one was Spokane Arts, and it's the city of Spokane. They have their own like art art government. I don't know if it's called agency or what, but they hosted an event that was around, I believe it was around applying for shows probably. And I remember the woman who was teaching it was talking about how it's really important to apply for things even if you get rejected. One, because you learn, but two, because you're putting your work in front of people who, even if your work doesn't make sense for that particular setting, then they know your name, and maybe next time you apply, they'll be like, hey, I actually remember this person. I liked their work last time. It didn't make sense for what we were doing, but it could make sense this time, or they might recall you for something else that they're curating or doing. And so in that way, as much as you're making yourself available or visible in the community, better, because then people know who you are. And probably giving people the benefit of the doubt, like even when things don't make sense. This actually did happen recently. There was a gallery that I submitted to 2 years ago, and they said, hey, we really like your work. It doesn't make sense for this particular theme, but if we ever find a slot to put you in, we would love to. And I remember thinking, that's just like, they're just being nice. Like, they didn't want to say no, it's fine. But a year later, they actually did slot me for a show. They're like, we found the perfect, like, your show totally makes sense for this theme. Like, we'd love to invite you back. Like, we've been waiting for a time to show your work. And so I think people are open, and as much as you can like share what you're doing and be available.
Do you mind if we talk a little bit about rejection?
I love talking about rejection. It's my favorite.
So actually, I guess what's that ratio like for you? Has it like gone better over time? And then also like I love that story about how you know, people say no up front but then say yes later. So I mean, if there are other stories like that, I'd love to hear that.
Well, I always tell a story of my professor in college who told us, you should strive to have more rejections than acceptances. If your rejection pile is not higher than your acceptance pile, you're not pushing yourself hard enough and you're not applying to enough things. And that has been the case for me. Like that is actually a growing area for me, because I know that I want to apply to more things. And I often will self-select out of things that I don't think I will be accepted to, which I actually have no idea. And I already just talked about how it's important to apply even if you get rejected for all the above reasons. But it is still scary to be like, this might be too much, like this might be too big time for me. And so I actually, that is a place where I could grow. But I knew artists who would make numerical goals around how many, not just rejections, how many things they would apply to, or even numerical goals around rejection. Like I want to aim for 50 rejections. And so if I get 50 rejections, that means I should probably at least apply to like 100 things this year, you know, which means I should apply to like, you know, 10 a month or whatever. So my ratio, I actually don't know what my ratio is, but I definitely don't have as many rejections as acceptances, but that's because I'm not pushing myself, and I know that.
Or you're just really talented and you're just knocking everything out of the park.
I'm pretty selective with what I apply to, and but some of that, I guess, at the same time, like I'm a fiber artist, but kind of multimedia. So I know, like, I shouldn't apply to a photography show because I don't do photography. Like that just makes sense. Like some things, I'm not going to apply to sculpture. Like I don't work in sculpture. Like there's some things that make sense for it, but
like, you know what medium you're in. Oh, and that makes sense, because like you sort of are more self-aware of like where you're at. You're able to sort of hone in on the things that have a higher percentage for you. So it's not always just like spinning your wheels and getting rejected from everything, although I guess you could, but like being like strategic about where things go.
I think there's also something with like street cred too. I'm not saying I have street cred. Like if you walk down if I walk down the street, no one knows who I am. So I don't have that. But in terms of like when you submit your resume, I think there is something to, I kind of mentioned like the snowball effect before, where you start out small, but then you kind of have momentum because you already have things under your belt. So I do feel like when people look at an artist's resume, if they see, oh, you've been pretty consistent in the community, or you've like shown in other places, or oh, you've like applied for grants or whatever, that especially for like grants or other things like that, but even for like a show, that shows them that you're serious about what you're doing and you're gonna bring that to whatever event or format you're applying for. So
that's good. It's good to hear.
It was very specific to the visual arts.
Gotcha.
All of my answers, but
do you have any advice for people who want to go into like? Do you have any advice for people who want to become artists or wanting into an artistic space?
I think you just have to do what you love, which I know is very millennial, like pie in the sky, dream big, whatever, that they tell us that we shouldn't do anymore because everything is terrible. But I do feel like that's kind of what I've built my life around, is the things that I love. So that's what I'm going to tell people. Like, I don't want to waste time doing something I don't love. And if it turns into something that I don't love, which sometimes when money's involved, it can be that, like, I think I have to reevaluate, like, where is this coming from? And is there like a shift in my identity that's happening that's not helpful? And how can I reorient? Or actually, Dan and I both have taken time. So I did the work that you were mentioning my collage work. I actually did kind of create, not in a vacuum, but I created thinking that I would never show anyone. And I actually needed that space. I needed to just separate myself completely from what other people's expectation and just make work that I liked. And that was also kind of scary because I remember thinking like, oh, this isn't like deep enough, or it doesn't communicate anything, or it's too pretty, like quote unquote pretty, and like it's just decorative or whatever. And I had to just silence all the voices that kind of were impeding my own inner voice and let what I wanted to do come out. And then from that place, I slowly got courage to maybe share it. But I think that was an important space to be in. So that's advice, I guess. I don't know.
No, I mean, I would say the exact same thing. I think there's like my photography that is just purely for me. And that a lot of it was when I first started. And I think that was, if I think about it, that's probably my happiest moments with photography. I still have happy moments with photography still, but I think now that it's, now that it's turned more into a business, like a lot of it has shifted to what clients want and what sort of style that they need for their particular brand or marketing and stuff like that. So it's definitely gone to that side. So it's nice to hear that, you still have space to create your own thing and do your own thing. And I feel like you have that more than I do sometimes. Like, I'm just going to be happy and do my own thing. And I'm really inspired by that.
Well, it does come at a cost because I say no to things. And that kind of goes against all the advice that people tell you for success. They literally say yes to everything. Like, I've had mentors tell me this with my art making. I've had opportunities that I've said no to. But I think that it depends on who you are as a person. Like, I'm someone who tends to say yes too much anyway, so I needed to be able to say no. And my art making is, like, I think primarily for my own healing and secondarily for others. And I don't even know if I agree with that statement. I just said it. But I think maybe if that's true, I'm okay with saying no. But maybe if that's flipped or the calling for you and your creative thing looks different, it's okay. Like, I don't think it's necessarily the right way. It's just how I'm doing it.
It's an interesting segue into a question, which is, do you think art and money can occupy the same space? Because I think I'm still trying to navigate that for my own photography. And it sounds like it's come sort of true for you, but I wonder if I can get your thoughts on that.
Man, I have such mixed feelings and thoughts about this because I love the idea of art just being a gift for the artist and for society at large. But you also need to survive. So I really wrestle with that. At the same time, I wonder if there's a way that your art can be a gift and also not reimbursement, what's it called when people pay you?
Compensation.
The compensation is a gift, like receiving that as a gift from your client or from, because it does feel like it, when people buy my art, it does feel like a gift. It feels like they're saying, I think your work is important and I like it enough to want to own it. That feels like a gift. And obviously the gift of being able to buy more food or like survive is a gift.
That's a real.
Yeah, so maybe I'm okay with that. I do have very strong feelings about art that is very much centered around consumer, not necessarily like utilitarian art like graphic design, things like that, but maybe art that tries to parade as coming from a place of wanting to speak to culture, but at the end of the day is just like an empty sounding board and is just telling people what they want to hear. That really offends me because I think art can be really powerful in transforming communities. So when it's just telling people what they want, it kind of makes me angry. But so like there's some like big time galleries where it just feels really meaningless to me, but art for me is full of meaning. So I don't know, maybe if you're fine with nothing, like everything being meaningless and it all being about money, then good for you. But I think that is a different space than like a worker being worth their wage and like you making something as a gift and then also receiving the gift of compensation in return. That feels more like mutual symbiotic relationship than maybe like manipulative money.
There's a healthy tension between the two.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know. Well,
Something
I
like
think
that.
I'm figuring it out.
Yeah. Well, I have that same thing too.
Yeah.
It's like, do because I've taken a lot of gigs where they couldn't compensate me, but like it was like a nonprofit or like something else where I like truly believed in it,
Yeah.
and then I was like, I'm having a lot of fun. It was like working with great people, working for a good cause, and it's like I'm okay with not being compensated. And then also like there's people who pay me a lot, and I'm just like struggling to like be there.
Yeah.
And at some point in my head, I'm just like, how much is this like even worth?
I know.
So
Maybe it is like what you're saying, it's a tension. And that's just like a tension that you live with as an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I think artists are not unfamiliar with tension in their work and in their thought process. I was wondering if we could end with actually 2 questions. Wondering, one, if you'd be okay with just sharing like what you believe, like, and how that sort of impacts your work.
Sure.
And then
Like my spirituality or my faith or
yeah,
yeah,
if that's
yeah,
cool.
totally.
Did you want to ask? Okay, I'll start with that. Well, I think as an artist of faith, when I talked about identity, for me, it's like believing and knowing that I'm created by the ultimate creator of the universe kind of puts everything else into perspective, and that my life is a gift. So I talk a lot about the idea of gift, but I truly feel like my life itself is a gift. And so what I create, I want it to be a gift to others. And I think that's the place where I wrestle, where does money fit into that? But I think that for me, with the calling of an artist, or even when do I get to name myself as an artist, really at the end of the day, God or creator, whatever you want to call him, like telling me that I'm an artist, telling myself that I'm an artist isn't enough. I needed to be rooted in something that's bigger than myself. And I needed to be rooted in something that isn't society or culture or others, because it's something that I think as humans, but especially for me, like I'm always going to want someone else to tell me who I am. And I need to be sure of that, not in my own voice or my own, because that even changes from day to day of like, who am I? Am I okay? So having God really rooting me is really important and like crucial to me, to my identity as an artist. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
And then I guess the final question, which is, what's the space that you want to create for this next year?
Whoa. What's the space I want to create? I'm curious about what I'm going to say next. I love. I want more freedom for myself in my art making, even more than I currently have, just to do whatever weird thing I want to do and not worry about what other people think. And I also I do love community building. We have like a little group of artist friends who meet semi-monthly and share projects that we're working on and get feedback. And I really love that, because I needed that and still need that really desperately in my practice. Like I need encouragement, I need people that push me, and so the more I can make space for that for others, the more fulfilled I feel as a creative person too.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show. You can definitely check out May Kytonen's work online, and if you're in Seattle, you may actually stumble across her work in one of the libraries or stations that are around Seattle. So once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.